One of the most subtle yet potent factors in why some people look and feel younger than others has less to do with their skincare routine and more to do with something energetic and deeply neurological: boundaries. Now, when I say boundaries, I'm not just referring to personal space or saying no to things you don't want to do, though those are important. I'm talking about the capacity to consciously regulate your exposure to people, environments, and even digital inputs that dysregulate your nervous system. This ties directly into something called allostatic load. That's the wear and tear on the body that accumulates when you're exposed to chronic stress. And one of the fastest ways to increase allostatic load is by failing to protect your energy. Constantly people-pleasing, saying yes when you mean no, overcommitting, or staying in environments that spike your stress hormones. Let's look at the biology. Every time you say yes to something that drains you, just to avoid conflict or maintain harmony, your sympathetic nervous system gets activated. Cortisol goes up. Adrenaline surges. Your system interprets this as threat. It doesn't matter that it's a text from your boss or a toxic group chat. To your body, it's no different than standing in front of a tiger. Now, if this becomes chronic, if you're leaking energy daily, micro-neglecting yourself to manage everyone else's expectations, you stay in a low-grade survival state. This accelerates aging. It impairs digestion. It weakens the immune system. Your skin might look more inflamed. You may even see more tension in your jaw, eyes, and shoulders. And it's not aging from time, it's aging from self-abandonment. But people who protect their energy, who know how to say, "that's not for me," without guilt, their biology reflects it. They have better dopaminergic tone, meaning their reward system isn't constantly being hijacked by the outside world. They preserve mental clarity, maintain stronger emotional resilience, and have lower levels of systemic inflammation. Why? Because their nervous system is not in constant battle mode. They're conserving energy, not leaking it. Spiritually, protecting your energy is an act of self-worth. It says, I don't owe everyone access to my attention, my body, or my bandwidth. And that creates coherence between what you feel, what you believe, and what you do. That kind of integrity radiates. It creates an internal safety that translates externally as confidence, ease, and, yes, here's the punchline: you can't look vibrant if you're constantly depleted. Youth isn't just about the absence of wrinkles, it's the presence of boundaries. Boundaries that guard your nervous system like the precious biological system it is. So ask yourself, where am I leaking energy? Who or what am I giving access to that doesn't return me to peace? And more importantly, what could I look and feel like if I finally honored the edges of my energy? Because when you protect your energy, your biology listens, and it starts restoring you from the inside out. Some of the most underrated spiritual and biological reasons someone appears younger than their age isn't about genetics. It's about how often they enter true regenerative states. Let's be clear, I'm not just talking about sleep, although high-quality sleep is essential. This goes deeper. I'm talking about entering parasympathetic dominant, deeply restorative states throughout your day and week. States that signal your body it's safe to heal now. Let's start with the neuroscience. The parasympathetic branch of the autonomic nervous system governs rest, digestion, and repair. It's often called the rest and digest system, but I prefer to think of it as the rebuild and restore system. This is when cellular repair happens. It's when your immune system recalibrates, your gut microbiome balances itself, and your brain clears out toxic byproducts like beta amyloid. In other words, this is when your body performs its anti-aging protocols. The problem? Most people never truly enter this state because even in their downtime, their minds are spinning, scrolling, worrying, ruminating, multitasking. That's not restoration, that's just more stimulation. People who look younger, truly younger, tend to have learned the skill of nervous system downshifting. They know how to shift into calm restorative states on purpose, Maybe it's through meditation. Maybe it's a walk in nature without a phone. Maybe it's art, slow breathing, prayer, or even deep presence with someone they love. But what's key is this. They practice turning the dial down. They know how to switch out of survival mode and into healing mode daily. From a hormonal standpoint, this is a game changer. Regenerative states lower cortisol and increase oxytocin and GABA2 neurochemicals that induce calm, connection, and neuroplasticity. These also influence your appearance in very real ways. Lower cortisol helps maintain collagen integrity. Higher oxytocin promotes cellular repair. GABA slows excitatory activity in the brain, helping you feel mentally clear and emotionally balanced. This is why some people carry a kind of softness in their presence. It's not weakness, it's nervous system coherence. And people perceive that as beauty, as calm, as youth. Spiritually, regenerative states are about surrender. You're not forcing outcomes or chasing the next hit of stimulation. You're in a receptive mode. And receptivity energetically is the opposite of depletion. It's saying to the universe, I trust that I don't have to hustle every second. I allow myself to be refilled. So if you're feeling burnt out, wrinkled from the inside out, aged by effort, ask yourself, where in my life do I allow deep restoration? Where do I downshift into peace, not just distraction? Because youthfulness isn't just about energy. It's about how well you recover your energy. And when you build daily habits around regeneration, not just rest, but repair, your body, your face, your spirit all begin to reflect that. One of the most biologically taxing and spiritually corrosive forms of stress is the stress of comparison. And in our modern, hyper-connected, algorithm-driven world, it's become nearly constant. But those who age gracefully and often appear younger than their years tend to share a quiet superpower. They've transcended the chronic need to compare themselves to others. Now, this isn't about arrogance or self-delusion. It's about neurobiological sovereignty. Let me explain. From a neuroscience perspective, social comparison activates specific brain regions, the medial prefrontal cortex, the anterior cingulate cortex, and the default mode network. These are involved in self-referential processing, how you think about yourself relative to others. In short bursts, this kind of comparison can be motivating, but chronic exposure, especially through social media, advertising, or environments that promote status anxiety, keeps the brain in a constant state of deficit tracking. You're always asking, am I behind? Am I enough? Do I measure up? This triggers the threat detection systems of the brain. You get low-level surges of cortisol, norepinephrine, and dopamine imbalances that are designed to drive you to improve, but they also deplete your nervous system over time, and they show up physically in the jaw, the tension around the eyes, shallow breathing, poor posture, even skin conditions related to chronic stress. It's not just emotional. Your body literally starts showing signs of burnout, accelerated aging from comparison fatigue. Now contrast that with someone who's transcended that loop, someone who's grounded in self-direction rather than external validation. Their nervous system moves differently. They're not in constant fight or flight. They're not subconsciously chasing someone else's metrics. That peace registers as relaxed musculature, fluid movement, and present moment awareness. And that, neurologically, is read by others as youthfulness, as vitality, as someone who's not in the game of proving, but simply being. This shift from comparison to internal clarity also shifts your neurochemistry. You begin to anchor into what researchers call intrinsic motivation, the drive to act based on internal values, not external rewards. This is more sustainable, less stressful, and it deeply supports nervous system regulation. Spiritually, transcending comparison is liberation. It's the move from ego to essence, from trying to be seen to allowing yourself to be real. That kind of authenticity has a frequency. It creates coherence across your thoughts, words, and actions, And when your nervous system aligns like that, it sends a clear message to your biology: you're safe, you're aligned, you can relax. So if you want to look younger, not just in skin, but in presence, look at where you're still measuring yourself against others. Ask, who am I when I stop performing? What does my face look like when I stop trying to win the invisible game? Because here's the truth. The younger version of you never needed to compete. They were just being. And maybe that's the most anti-aging thing of all. There's something almost ineffable about people who look younger than their age. It's not just the absence of lines or the smoothness of skin. It's a kind of softness, a receptivity, a warmth. And that, more than anything, is rooted in emotional openness. Let's talk biology first. The human face is one of the most expressive surfaces in the body, packed with 43 muscles and directly wired into the brain via the facial nerve, a major branch of the cranial nerves. When we're emotionally closed off, guarded, hardened, shut down, our facial muscles literally change. The forehead tenses, the jaw tightens, the eyes narrow, and micro-expressions shift to reflect subtle cues of defense. Over time, that default facial posture becomes etched into our skin. The body reads that as chronic stress. Others read it as coldness or fatigue or just aging. But emotional openness, the willingness to stay soft in a hard world, to feel deeply, to express joy, empathy, awe, or even grief, changes your physiology. Let me be very specific. When we are emotionally open, the vagus nerve becomes more active. This increases facial expressivity, improves heart rate variability, and even enhances vocal resonance. These shifts are subtle but powerful. You smile more easily, your eyes carry more depth, your voice becomes more melodic, less strained. All of these are markers that others unconsciously associate with youth, vitality, and emotional safety. Even your immune system responds. Openness reduces internal rigidity, and this correlates with reduced inflammation, better immune surveillance, and faster cellular recovery after stress. The whole body reads emotional openness as cooperation, not combat. That state is deeply healing. And on a spiritual level, emotional openness is a kind of surrender, not weakness, but courage. The courage to stay human in a world that often encourages you to disconnect, to keep your heart accessible, to cry when something moves you, to laugh with your whole chest, to forgive, to be moved by beauty, music, poetry, or the pain of another. That openness is not only spiritually magnetic, it's biologically rejuvenating. You see, we weren't meant to armor up every day. The armor is aging. The armor keeps joy, connection, and intimacy out. And when those are missing, the nervous system interprets life as a threat, not a home. So ask yourself, where have I hardened emotionally? Where have I closed off? And what might my body look and feel like if I let some of that go? Because youthfulness isn't just an aesthetic, it's a frequency. And that frequency is clearest in people who aren't afraid to be open, to feel, and to be real. In a very real way, your face tells the story of your nervous system. And when your heart is open, your face becomes timeless. So here's what I want you to take away from all of this. What I want you to feel in your body, not just understand with your mind. Looking younger isn't just a gift of genetics or clean eating or sleep hygiene, though those matter. It's a signal, a reflection, a bioenergetic mirror of how deeply you are living in alignment with who you really are. Your youthfulness, your glow, your energy, your vibrancy isn't something that fades with time. It's something that responds to how you treat your nervous system, how you honor your boundaries, how often you invite joy, and how willing you are to stay emotionally open in a world that wants you to armor up and shut down. This is where science meets spirit. Because the most regenerative signal you can send to your biology, the one that protects your brain, softens your face, and keeps your eyes bright, is this: I am safe to be myself. When you live from that place, not to impress, not to compete, not to perform, but to be real, your body responds, your brain calms, your cells repair, and your whole presence starts to radiate the kind of timelessness that no product, no procedure, and no filter can replicate. So if you've been asking, why do I look younger than I am? The answer might be that some part of you has already remembered the truth. You're not here to age on someone else's timeline. You're here to be fully alive on your own. Today, I want to talk about something that might surprise you. We're going to step just slightly outside of traditional neuroscience, but not away from it. Instead, we're going to look at the intersection of biology and what I'll call spiritual meaning. And the topic is this: why do some people just seem to look younger, regardless of age, not just biologically, but energetically, emotionally, and spiritually? Now, before we get into any metaphysical concepts, let's be clear. There are real, measurable changes in hormones, neurochemistry, and gene expression that influence how we age. Things like cortisol levels, dopamine signaling, and cellular turnover. But there's something else. You've likely met people in their 50s, 60s, even 70s who look, move, and speak like they're in their 30s. There's an X factor. And sometimes that X factor aligns with spiritual energy. So today I want to walk you through 3 spiritual meanings, or you could think of them as mind-body patterns, that science is just beginning to explain, which might answer why you or someone you know appears younger than their chronological age. Some of the most powerful spiritual and biological indicators of youthfulness is not something you can measure with a blood test. It's curiosity. Curiosity, in both the spiritual and neurological sense, is the hallmark of a flexible, open, and adaptive mind. And when we talk about appearing younger, emotionally, energetically, even physically, curiosity plays a central role. Let's break this down through the lens of neuroscience first. When you're curious, your brain releases dopamine, a neuromodulator that's not just about pleasure, but about motivation to seek. It's the chemical signature of the exploration mode in the brain. The prefrontal cortex, which governs executive function and decision-making, becomes more active. The hippocampus, which encodes memory and learning, becomes more plastic. And norepinephrine, which sharpens focus and attention, increases just enough to heighten awareness without tipping into stress. In short, curiosity literally tunes your brain to be more youthful, more responsive, more resilient. The neurobiology of curiosity resembles that of a younger person, someone who's still discovering the world rather than trying to defend what they already think they know. Now let's touch on the spiritual or psychological layer. People who cling to certainty tend to age faster, not just emotionally, but also physiologically. Why? Because rigid beliefs and closed-loop thinking activate chronic stress responses. When we're dogmatic, closed off, or chronically trying to prove we're right, our sympathetic nervous system, the fight or flight system, tends to stay active. That leads to elevated cortisol levels, which in turn accelerate aging, faster telomere shortening, higher inflammation, impaired immune response. The body keeps score, and it ages accordingly. But curiosity interrupts that pattern. It says, what if I don't know yet? What if I'm still becoming? That question opens space in the nervous system. It reintroduces flexibility. It downshifts the body from a defensive, closed state to an open learning state. People who live this way often smile more genuinely, express awe more freely, and experience the world with a sense of wonder. These traits show up in microexpressions in the eyes, the face, the voice, and people perceive them as youthful, even if they can't explain why. From a spiritual perspective, curiosity is humility in action. It's the lived belief that life is still unfolding, that every moment contains a potential revelation. And that belief, whether you call it a mindset, a frequency, or a nervous system state, preserves youth better than any cosmetic intervention ever could. So if you want to stay young, not just in appearance, but in vitality and presence, trade some of your certainty for curiosity. It's one of the few trades that gives you energy instead of draining it. Most of the most understated yet profound indicators of inner youth is emotional lightness. And the root of that lightness? Letting go of the past. Now, that may sound like a spiritual cliche, but I want to show you how this concept maps directly onto the nervous system, your hormonal profile, and even your rate of cellular aging. Let's start with the brain. When we hold on to emotional pain, whether it's regret, resentment, shame, or grief, what's actually happening is that specific neural circuits are looping. The amygdala, our brain's fear and emotional memory center, becomes sensitized. It essentially stays on high alert, scanning for patterns that resemble past pain. This keeps your brain in a defensive state. It's exhausting, and over time it manifests physically through tension in the face and body, stress-induced inflammation, and even disruptions to the skin barrier, which accelerates the visible signs of aging. When you haven't metabolized the past, your sympathetic nervous system, the part responsible for fight or flight, doesn't fully downregulate. Even when you're at rest, your body stays primed for danger. That leads to chronically elevated levels of cortisol and adrenaline. Cortisol in particular breaks down collagen, disrupts sleep, and impairs tissue repair. It's literally aging you from the inside out. But here's where things get interesting. Letting go of the past, whether through therapy, journaling, deep spiritual work, or even somatic practices like breath work, activates a kind of neurochemical reset. It deactivates the overfiring amygdala and re-engages the prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for logic, empathy, and long-term decision-making. More importantly, it allows the parasympathetic nervous system, your rest, repair, and recovery system, to come back online. In this state, your body starts to heal. Your face softens, your voice gets more melodic, your posture shifts. You don't just look younger, you feel lighter, and others perceive that as youth. From a spiritual standpoint, letting go of the past isn't about denial, it's about release. It's saying, I no longer identify with what happened to me. I don't carry that weight anymore. And that act of release is one of the most anti-aging, vitality-generating things a person can do. In fact, in studies on people who practice forgiveness, we see lower inflammatory markers, better immune response, and even longer telomeres, those little caps on the ends of your DNA that correlate directly with lifespan. You see, the past weighs heavily on the nervous system, and when you let go, when you truly stop carrying it, your brain chemistry, your heart rate variability, your immune system, and your face, they all reflect it. In a very real sense, youth is lightness. Not the absence of experience, but the absence of emotional baggage. So if you want to look and feel younger, don't just buy creams or supplements. Ask yourself, what am I still carrying? And more importantly, what am I finally ready to put down? Some of the most consistent patterns I've observed in both the lab and in the real world is that people who look younger than their age often live with a sense of internal alignment. They may not always be able to articulate their life's purpose in a sentence, but their nervous system reflects that they're living in a way that feels right. And that has profound implications biologically, psychologically, and spiritually. Let's start with the brain again. The default mode network, which is a set of interconnected brain regions active when we're not focused on the outside world, is heavily involved in self-reflection, identity, and meaning-making. When people feel disconnected from purpose, this network tends to spin in negative, repetitive loops, self-doubt, comparison, rumination. But when we're living in alignment, that same network quiets down, and what takes its place is something we call the task-positive network, a system that supports goal-directed behavior, creative flow, and present moment awareness. The result? You become more engaged with life. more focused, more inspired. And that psychological state is mirrored in your physiology: better sleep quality, improved digestion, more stable hormones, and reduced inflammation. These aren't small things. These are the building blocks of youthful vitality. Well, here's where this gets even more interesting. When people are aligned with purpose, even in a loose, intuitive way, their body responds as if it's being nourished. The autonomic nervous system stabilizes, heart rate variability improves, which is one of the best predictors of stress resilience and long-term health. And the brain releases oxytocin, the social bonding neuropeptide that also promotes tissue healing, immune regulation, and even smoother skin. You ever meet someone who just radiates energy, even if they're older? That glow isn't just charisma, it's coherence. It's the byproduct of internal systems firing in harmony. That's what alignment does. It synchronizes you. Now, here's the spiritual angle. Living in alignment doesn't mean you're never tired or that you love every second of what you do. It means that on a deeper level, you know you're on the right track. You're moving towards something meaningful, even if it's evolving or unclear. That internal compass, the belief that your life matters, that you're here for a reason, literally protects your biology. In one longitudinal study, individuals with a strong sense of purpose were found to have a reduced risk of Alzheimer's, lower rates of heart disease, and longer lifespans. Think about that. Not just less anxiety, but less physical disease. That's not just psychology. That's neuroimmunology at work. So if you've ever looked in the mirror and thought, I feel younger than I look, ask yourself this. Am I living in alignment? Am I making choices, big and small, that honor who I am and who I'm becoming? Because here's the truth. Purpose isn't just a compass for your soul. It's a rejuvenation signal to your cells. When we talk about aging, especially looking older or younger than your chronological age, we usually think in terms of skin, muscles, or hormones. But what if one of the most overlooked yet powerful anti-aging mechanisms is joy? Now, I want to be clear, we're not talking about momentary pleasure or surface-level happiness. We're talking about authentic joy, the kind that bubbles up from inside when you laugh freely, when you dance without self-consciousness, when you're immersed in music, play, love, or awe. That type of joy isn't just emotionally nourishing. It literally reshapes how your body functions, especially through the autonomic nervous system. Let's get specific. The autonomic nervous system controls the automatic functions of the body: heart rate, breathing, digestion, immune response. It has two primary branches: the sympathetic, fight or flight, and the parasympathetic, rest and repair. When you're chronically stressed or emotionally guarded, the sympathetic branch dominates. That raises inflammation, tightens muscles, speeds up aging, and lowers your body's capacity to heal. But joy, real joy, activates the parasympathetic system, especially the vagus nerve, which is a major player in calming your body, regulating your heart, and promoting digestive health. When the vagus nerve is activated through laughter, music, breath, or meaningful social connection, your heart rate variability increases, your stress hormones decrease, your immune system strengthens. You quite literally enter a healing state. This is why children who live closer to pure joy and play have this radiant magnetic energy. And it's also why adults who reconnect with joy through art, friendship, humor, or nature tend to reverse that tired, worn-down look. Their faces soften, their voices carry more warmth, their bodies move more fluidly, and their eyes, they sparkle. That sparkle is youth. On a neurological level, joy stimulates the release of serotonin, dopamine, and endorphins. These aren't just feel-good chemicals. They enhance neuroplasticity, promote repair, and slow down the aging process in the brain. Joy also reduces the activity of the default mode network, that mind-wandering, self-critical part of the brain, and instead brings you into the present moment. That's what makes joy look like youth, presence. aliveness. Spiritually speaking, joy is often described as a signal that you're in harmony with the moment. You're not trying to escape or change anything, you're in it fully. And that resonance between your inner world and outer experience sends a message to your entire system. We're safe, we're alive, we can grow here. That message unlocks regeneration. So if you want to look younger, and more importantly, feel younger, start asking, where do I find real joy? And am I making time for it, or am I postponing it for some future?